Joe Rogan sat in a darkened room watching footage that shouldn't exist. An orb, glowing, pulsing, moving through a house with what looked like intention, purpose, intelligence. When the video ended, Rogan, a man who's interviewed killers and conspiracy theorists without flinching, looked genuinely shaken. And then they told him something that made it worse. You can't unsee this. Once you know what's out there, once you understand what's happening at Skinwalker Ranch, the fear never really goes away. This is the story of what Joe Rogan experienced at America's most paranormally active location, the footage they showed him, the witnesses who changed his perspective, and why a man known for fearless skepticism admitted that Skinwalker Ranch tapped into something he's been terrified of since childhood. Subscribe now, because what we're about to reveal will change how you think about what's possible in our reality. Joe Rogan isn't someone you'd expect to be afraid of the paranormal. He's a UFC commentator who's watched men get knocked unconscious in brutal fashion, a comedian who's performed in front of hostile crowds, a podcast host who's sat across from serial killers, cartel members, and people describing the darkest aspects of human nature. Fear, in the traditional sense, isn't something Rogan displays publicly, but Rogan has admitted in multiple podcast episodes that the paranormal terrifies him. Not in an abstract intellectual way, but in a deep, primal, childhood-level fear that he's carried his entire life. Ghosts, unexplained phenomena, the idea that reality might contain things that violate our understanding of how the world works. These concepts have always unsettled him in ways that physical danger never has, which makes his decision to engage with Skinwalker Ranch all the more significant. Rogan has described it as deliberately confronting something he was subconsciously terrified of, like exposure therapy for a fear he'd never fully acknowledged. He wanted to face it, understand it, maybe prove to himself that there were rational explanations for the phenomena people reported. But what he found at Skinwalker Ranch, and what he learned from the people who'd experienced it firsthand, didn't provide the rational explanations he was hoping for. Instead, it confirmed his deepest fear, that there are things in our world that don't follow the rules we've established, things that are intelligent, aware, and possibly hostile. And once you know they exist, once you've seen the evidence, you can't unknow it. The fact that someone with Rogan's public persona, tough, skeptical, grounded in physical reality, could be genuinely shaken by Skinwalker Ranch says something profound about the place. Because if Rogan, who approaches most conspiracy theories and paranormal claims with healthy skepticism, walks away from Skinwalker Ranch disturbed, then maybe the stories about that remote Utah property deserve more serious consideration than most people give them. Skinwalker Ranch is a 512-acre property in northeastern Utah that has become synonymous with high strangeness, UFO sighting, mysterious orbs of light, cattle mutilations that defy conventional explanation, poltergeist-like activity, strange creatures that don't match any known wildlife, electronic equipment that fails in specific areas of the property, and witnesses, credible witnesses, who report experiences that sound impossible. The name itself comes from Navajo legend. Skinwalkers are shape-shifting witches in indigenous mythology, malevolent beings who can take the form of animals and inflict harm through supernatural means. The Navajo people traditionally don't speak about skinwalkers lightly. The very mention of them is considered dangerous, an invitation for negative spiritual forces. That this ranch carries that name tells you something about its reputation among people who've lived in the region for generations. But Skinwalker Ranch isn't just Native American folklore. Modern investigations have documented phenomena that seem to blend ancient mythology with contemporary, unexplained events. The ranch has been studied by scientists, investigated by government agencies, and featured in mainstream media. It's owned by Brandon Fugel, a real estate mogul who's invested millions in scientific instrumentation to document whatever is happening there. The property's history of high strangeness goes back decades, but it became widely known in the 1990s when the Sherman family purchased it and began experiencing phenomena so intense they eventually fled. UFOs that would hover silently over the property, strange lights that moved with apparent intelligence, cattle found mutilated with surgical precision, organs removed, blood completely drained, no tracks or evidence of predators anywhere near the carcasses. But what terrified the Sherman family most wasn't the individual incidents. It was the sense that something was aware of them, watching them, interacting with them in ways that felt deliberate and targeted. Objects would move, electronics would fail, voices would be heard in the sky speaking in languages they didn't recognize, and perhaps most disturbing, massive wolf-like creatures that seemed impervious to bullets would appear and vanish. The family reported sleeping together on the floor of their living room because they were too terrified to be separated. A Imagine that. A ranching family, people who make their living off the land, who understand wildlife and natural phenomena, so frightened by what was happening on their property that they couldn't function normally. That level of sustained fear drove them to sell the ranch and never speak publicly about their experiences for years. This is the place Joe Rogan engaged with. Not a campfire story location, not a tourist attraction trading on vague legends. A property with documented history of phenomena that have terrified multiple families, stumped scientists, and resisted every attempt at rational explanation. And what Rogan learned about Skinwalker Ranch, particularly what he saw in that footage, would fundamentally change his relationship with the paranormal. One of the most consistent phenomena reported at Skinwalker Ranch involves orbs, not vague lights in the distance that could be misidentified aircraft or atmospheric phenomena. Distinct glowing spheres that move with apparent purpose, respond to human presence, and behave in ways that suggest intelligence rather than natural occurrence. Joe Rogan has spoken extensively about an encounter story that particularly affected him. A blue-collar witness, someone Rogan described as completely credible and grounded, reported that a small orb entered his house, not through a window or door, through the wall. It moved through the interior of his home, seeming to examine things, and at one point appeared to communicate with him, not verbally, but through behavior that suggested awareness and intention. What made this account compelling to Rogan wasn't just the description, it was the witness himself. This wasn't someone making wild claims about aliens or government conspiracy. This was a regular person describing a single, specific experience that had profoundly disturbed him. No embellish, no attempts to connect it to larger theories. Just a straightforward account of something impossible that had happened in his home. But the orb phenomenon isn't isolated to one witness. Rogan also described seeing what he called a pristine photograph of an orb from another witness at a Skinwalker Ranch event. The image was clear enough to show details. The orb wasn't a blur or a light artifact. It was a distinct object captured in what appeared to be a structured, almost solid form. The photograph had been analyzed and couldn't be easily dismissed as lens flare, reflection, or digital artifact. This pattern, multiple credible witnesses reporting similar phenomena, is what elevates Skinwalker Ranch from folklore to something that demands serious investigation. When one person reports seeing orbs, you can dismiss it. When dozens of people, over decades, describe the same type of phenomena with remarkable consistency, you have to start asking harder questions about what's actually happening. The orbs represent something particularly unsettling about Skinwalker Ranch. They're not passive phenomena. They don't just appear and disappear randomly. According to multiple witnesses, they seem to interact. They approach people. They enter buildings. They respond to human presence and behavior. That suggests intelligence. And intelligence in something that violates our understanding of physics creates a category of fear that's different from simple startle responses or danger avoidance. When Rogan talks about the orbs, you can hear the tension in his voice. This isn't entertainment for him. It's not a fun mystery to speculate about. It's something that challenges his worldview in a fundamental way. Because if the orbs are real, if they're actually intelligent and interactive, then what are they? Where do they come from? And what do they want? There's footage from Skinwalker Ranch that the public hasn't seen, not because it's being suppressed by government agencies or hidden for nefarious reasons, but because the people who have it recognize that showing it widely would create a type of fear that's difficult to contain. The fear of knowing. The fear that comes from understanding that reality is fundamentally different from what we've been told. Joe Rogan was shown some of this footage in private screening, away from cameras, away from the public format of his podcast. The people running investigations at Skinwalker Ranch, serious scientists and researchers, sat him down and showed him documentation of phenomena that they couldn't explain through conventional means. The footage included those orbs, not distant lights, close-up documentation of objects moving through space in ways that defy known physics, sudden acceleration, 90-degree turns at speeds that would destroy any physical craft, movement through solid objects, and perhaps most disturbing, behavior that suggested awareness of being filmed, as if the orbs knew they were being documented and either didn't care or wanted to be seen. But, according to accounts, there was other footage as well. Unexplained figures captured on thermal imaging, heat signatures that appeared and vanished without corresponding physical presence, audio recordings of voices speaking in frequencies and patterns that didn't match human speech or any known animal vocalizations, electronic equipment failures that happened in sequence, as if something was deliberately shutting down instrumentation. What made the footage particularly disturbing wasn't just what it showed, but what it implied. This wasn't random. The phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch appeared to be intelligent, purposeful, and in some cases targeted at specific individuals. People who spent time on the property reported that the activity seemed to follow them. Equipment would fail when they approached certain areas. Phenomena would increase in frequency when particular researchers were present. This is what creates the fear of knowing. It's one thing to hear stories about paranormal activity. It's another to see documented evidence that something is happening that science can't explain. And it's something else entirely to understand that this thing, whatever it is, might be aware of you, might be interacting with you, might have intentions that you can't predict or understand. Rogan has described his reaction to the footage as a mix of fascination and deep unease. Part of him wanted to see more, to understand what was happening. But another part recognized that each new piece of evidence made it harder to maintain comfortable skepticism. The more he learned about Skinwalker Ranch, the less he could dismiss it. And that loss of ability to dismiss creates its own kind of existential fear. The people who showed Rogan the footage told him something important. You can't unsee this. Once you've watched this evidence, once you've understood what it represents, your relationship with reality changes. You start wondering what else is out there that we don't understand. What else is interacting with our world that we've dismissed or ignored? And that wondering, that uncertainty about the fundamental nature of reality creates a fear that never fully goes away. What separates Skinwalker Ranch from other allegedly haunted or paranormally active locations is the consistent reporting of intelligent behavior. This isn't random poltergeist activity. It's not vague feelings or ambiguous experiences. Multiple witnesses, over decades, describe phenomena that appears to think, plan, and respond to human presence with what can only be called strategic awareness. Objects move in ways that suggest deliberate interaction. Electronics drain at times that seem calculated to create maximum inconvenience or fear. The orbs appear when specific people are present, as if targeting individuals for observation. Cattle mutilations happen in patterns that defy random predator behavior, with surgical precision that suggests tools and intelligence rather than animal attacks. Families who've lived on the ranch report experiences that feel personal. Not just strange events happening around them, but events that seem designed to affect them specifically. Voices speaking their names, objects significant to them being moved or manipulated, activity that increases when they try to investigate or decreases when they try to ignore it. This adaptive, responsive behavior creates a psychological impact that goes beyond simple fear. Joe Rogan has spoken about this aspect of Skinwalker Ranch with particular concern. The idea that something is toying with people, playing with them, creating fear not through direct harm but through psychological manipulation and demonstration of capabilities that shouldn't exist. That's the kind of intelligence that terrifies in a unique way, because you can't predict it, can't prepare for it, and can't escape the sense that you're being observed and evaluated. Scientific teams investigating the ranch have documented this intelligent behavior through controlled experiments. They'll set up equipment in specific patterns and watch as phenomena seems to avoid the instrumentation. They'll create protocols to capture evidence and observe the activity changing in response, as if whatever is there understands what they're trying to do and either evades documentation or deliberately provides evidence in ways that create more questions than answers. This intelligence factor is what makes Skinwalker Ranch different from UFO sightings or ghost stories. UFOs could be misidentified aircraft or atmospheric phenomena. Ghosts could be psychological projection or environmental factors. But the pattern of intelligent, targeted, adaptive behavior at Skinwalker Ranch resists those comfortable explanations. Something there is thinking, and that something appears to be aware of the humans trying to understand it. For someone like Rogan, who values rational thought and evidence-based understanding, this creates profound cognitive dissonance. How do you rationally explain intelligence that exists outside known biological frameworks? How do you study something that appears to study you back? How do you investigate phenomena that seem to understand and respond to your investigation methods? Joe Rogan has interviewed thousands of people over his career. He's developed a sense for when someone is lying, exaggerating, or misremembering. He knows the difference between a person telling the truth as they understand it versus someone creating a story for attention. And his encounters with Skinwalker Ranch witnesses convinced him that something genuine was happening, even if he couldn't fully explain what. The blue-collar witness he's referenced multiple times stood out specifically because of his credibility. This wasn't someone seeking fame or promoting a book. He wasn't making wild claims about alien civilizations or government conspiracies. He simply described a single, specific experience, the orb entering his house, with the kind of detail and emotional resonance that suggested genuine trauma and confusion. What particularly affected Rogan was that this witness had no framework for understanding what happened to him. He wasn't a paranormal enthusiast with ready-made explanations. He was a regular person who'd experienced something impossible and was still trying to process it. That confusion, that genuine bewilderment is harder to fake than certainty, and it made his account more compelling than elaborate theories from self-proclaimed experts. Rogan has also spoken about meeting multiple witnesses who reported similar experiences without having contact with each other. The pattern matching across independent accounts is significant. When people who don't know each other describe the same types of phenomena in the same locations with consistent details, it becomes much harder to dismiss as individual delusion or attention-seeking. The scientists and researchers working at Skinwalker Ranch also impressed Rogan with their credibility. These weren't fringe figures or UFO enthusiasts. They were credentialed professionals, some with backgrounds in physics, engineering, and aerospace, who approached the investigation with genuine skepticism and rigorous methodology. The fact that they were documenting phenomena they couldn't explain carried weight specifically because they were trying hard to explain it through conventional means. What shifted Rogan's perspective wasn't any single piece of evidence or testimony. It was the cumulative weight of multiple credible witnesses, sophisticated documentation, and his own emotional response to engaging with the material. He wanted to remain skeptical. He tried to find conventional explanations, but the combination of witness credibility and documented evidence made comfortable dismissal impossible. This is perhaps the most important aspect of Rogan's Skinwalker Ranch experience. He didn't become a true believer. He didn't abandon skepticism or start accepting every paranormal claim uncritically, but he acknowledged that Skinwalker Ranch presented evidence and testimony that he couldn't easily explain away. And that acknowledgement from someone with his platform and credibility matters significantly to how seriously people take the phenomena. There's a concept in psychology called the knowledge burden. Once you know something, once you've seen evidence that fundamentally challenges your understanding of reality, you can't unknow it. You can try to rationalize it away, find alternative explanations, or simply avoid thinking about it. But the knowledge remains, creating a low-level anxiety that colors how you perceive the world. Joe Rogan has spoken about how engaging with Skinwalker Ranch created this burden for him. Before, the paranormal was something he could be afraid of in an abstract way. Ghost stories were entertainment. UFO sightings were interesting speculation. But after seeing the footage, meeting the witnesses, and confronting the evidence directly, the paranormal became real in a way that changed his relationship with reality itself. The fear he describes isn't about immediate danger. It's not the fear of being attacked or physically harmed. It's the existential fear that comes from understanding that reality contains things we don't comprehend, that there might be intelligent forces operating around us that we can't see, predict, or control, that the comfortable assumption that we understand how the world works might be fundamentally wrong. This is why the people who showed Rogan the footage warned him about seeing it, not because the images themselves are traumatic in a traditional sense, but because they create a shift in perspective that's difficult to reverse. Once you've seen documentation of phenomena that violates known physics, once you've understood that credible witnesses and sophisticated instruments are capturing evidence of something impossible, you can't go back to comfortable certainty about reality. Rogan has admitted that Skinwalker Ranch got into his head in ways that other intense experiences haven't. He's interviewed war veterans describing combat trauma. He's talked to survivors of horrible crimes. He's discussed death, violence, and human suffering extensively. But the fear created by Skinwalker Ranch is different because it's not about things humans do to each other. It's about the possibility that we're not alone in reality, and that what shares reality with us might be beyond our ability to understand or interact with safely. This fear manifests in subtle ways. Rogan has mentioned being more aware of unexplained phenomena after Skinwalker Ranch, more attentive to things that don't quite make sense, more willing to consider that strange experiences people report might have validity. It's not that he became credulous or started believing every paranormal claim, but he lost the ability to dismiss things automatically, and that loss of automatic dismissal creates ongoing uncertainty. The knowledge burden extends to sharing information. Rogan has been relatively careful about discussing specific details of what he saw in that footage. He references, he acknowledges it affected him, but he doesn't describe it in explicit detail. That restraint suggests recognition that spreading detailed information about phenomena this unsettling might create the same knowledge burden in others. Some things, once known, create fear that can't be easily managed. If even a fraction of what's reported at Skinwalker Ranch is accurate, the implications extend far beyond one property in Utah. The existence of intelligent, interactive phenomena that operate outside known physical laws would require fundamental revisions to our understanding of reality. Not just scientific theories, but philosophical, spiritual, and practical frameworks for understanding our place in the universe. Joe Rogan understands these implications, which is part of why Skinwalker Ranch affected him so profoundly. If the orbs are real and intelligent, what are they? Are they technological, suggesting advanced civilizations with capabilities we can't comprehend? Are they biological, implying life forms that evolved along completely different lines than anything we know? Are they something else entirely? Entities that exist in dimensions or states we don't have concepts for? The targeted intelligent behavior reported at Skinwalker Ranch also raises disturbing questions questions about intent. If these phenomena are aware of humans and capable of interaction, what do they want? The activity seems designed to create fear and confusion rather than communication or harm. It's psychological rather than physical. What kind of intelligence invests effort in toying with humans without clear purpose or outcome? There's also the question of scope. If Skinwalker Ranch is experiencing this level of activity, what's happening in other locations that aren't being studied as intensively? Are there phenomena occurring globally that we're missing because we're not looking, or because we've culturally conditioned ourselves to dismiss reports as delusion or lies? How much of our reality is shaped by things we don't acknowledge or understand? For Rogan, these questions connect to larger themes he explores on his podcast: the limits of human knowledge, the possibility of non-human intelligence, the relationship between consciousness and reality. Skinwalker Ranch provides a concrete case study where these abstract questions become tangible. The phenomena there demands explanation, but resists every conventional framework we try to apply. The knowledge that something like Skinwalker Ranch exists, that intelligent phenomena are documented and studied but remain unexplained, creates a specific kind of cognitive burden. We live in a world where we assume science will eventually explain everything, where the unexplained is simply the not yet explained. But Skinwalker Ranch suggests that maybe some phenomena will resist explanation indefinitely, not because our methods are inadequate, but because the phenomena themselves exist outside the boundaries of what our current frameworks can address.